Alhaji Hassan Nado, the national chairman of SUPKEM, is our guest this morning. We're talking the way out of the Mandamano and back into normalcy. And you've said, Sheikh, that if we can separate some issues, one, we look at those very majorly political issues and put them aside for a bit. This is questioning the legitimacy of the Ruto administration, demanding the reinstatement of the Cherera for who resigned, looking at the demands for opening of the servers and whatever that would mean. Put those ones aside and then focus on issues that actually affects all Kenyans. Cost of living, number one. We have an education crisis, you said. We discussed that. We have a big issue with corruption. We have a big issue with climate change and the impact of climate change and how we respond to climate change. And then also properly tackling this giant thing we call electoral justice once and for all, and a proper roadmap for it. And for this, you say, it is important that the national leadership holds dialogue. And I asked you, so who's going to call the dialogue? And you said it can only come from the leaders. Those leaders have, however, told, like religious leaders, step aside, this is our battle. We are going to fight. How shall we come to getting them to have sense? Does it sound like we are actually now being held captive by those political leaders until the moment they feel that they have battled enough on the streets, they're not going to have dialogue?
Yeah, actually, for dialogue to happen in every environment, it is important that the Azimio leadership, the leadership of Prime Minister Raila Odinga, steps down, from the level that they are in at the moment. For example, if you want to engage, for example, the leader of government, the President of the Republic, you must first of all accept that he is legitimate, because it's very difficult for you to say, I want to engage an illegitimate regime. Then what happens to us as a country? Because we have been having President Ruto in power for the last 7 months now. And so are we, what are we as a country? Because all what we know is that we have a president in the country. So to me, I think one of the things that can actually allow, for example, some sense of reasoning is certain hard positions that are taken. Make it very difficult for us to achieve the dialogue. So I think the first thing that Raila Odinga should do is to recognize that Kenya has a legitimately elected president. For you to become an illegitimate president, of course, IEBC have to announce you. And if you have gone to the Supreme Court have to do a pronouncement and will be sworn in. So the moment you have been sworn in, honestly, you become the president of the Republic of Kenya. So there is no any other way. You cannot have an illegitimate president who has passed through the processes of being the president. The second thing that is actually the Prime Minister must appreciate is that the question about the servers, for example, was an issue that was taken to the court. It was under the contestation in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court pronounced itself on the issue about the servers. Apart from the server, and as a Kenyan, I think one of the things we should be talking about is not even necessarily opening of the server. Who owns the server? Because to me, as an ordinary Kenyan, I know we bought the system that was hosting the elections of this country. Okay, so it is sometimes what we heard from the Supreme Court that at one point when the Supreme Court ordered the opening of the servers, the Smartmatic or that company that was whatever claimed that
Smartmatic.
Yes, exactly. They claimed that that will actually interfere with their copyright issues.
Yeah.
Then you ask yourself, then what did IBC buy?
So what did we buy?
What did we buy? And this is not the first time we are getting ourselves in that problem. We were there also in 2017 or 2013?
Yeah,
2017.
Yes, when again the time factor between Kenya and France was interestingly, because in another country they were sleeping and we are busy in the Supreme Court here and we want the outcome of, we want to see what our servers, and we are being told the host is asleep. And here we have spent the whole amount of money purchasing. So what did we purchase? Can we be? So these are, to me, they are critical things that we need to look at, because the server now, the opening of the server will not serve the purpose at the moment, because it was open partially through the Supreme Court intervention. They saw what happened there. I don't know now what they have found inside. I don't even know how they got an insight to know what was there which was not found in the Supreme Court order. So, but it is not something that we can just wish it away. I think we now need to question IBC. What did they buy? They should tell Kenyans, what did we pay? Because it's not small money, it's a huge amount of money. To me, that is another area. So the last part of this is the Cherera 4. I was part of the team that were actually trying to do the shuttle diplomacy then, immediately after the fallout at Bomas, and we tried to do all what we can. Unfortunately, we did not succeed, but of course our voice was heard. Now these commissioners have resigned. And the one who did not resign, unfortunately, was finally found culpable, and then she was now suspended or removed for that matter. Office, So I think these are issues that we are under the water, if you ask me. Can we now be able to say, these ones, let us work on the way we can only solve the electoral justice. Can we be able to now to be following up what does this IBC does? Because when we engaged the former chair, Jubokati, then, towards the last days of elections, just few days to elections, the IBC was struggling to have some legislations passed through Parliament. Because they did not. What was happening? Jubokati and his team sat down to look at the judgment of the last Supreme Court judgment of Justice Maraga to try to rectify those things that were said by Justice Maraga. And that is why they actually made some improvements, because there were serious improvements on IBC performance this time around. They were serious. And that what made that improvements because they worked on the recommendations of the Supreme Court of Justice Maraga. So what we are supposed to be doing now equally is to look at what are the recommendations that were made in the last judgment, and then we put into account. And I think we also need to prepare and to make sure our legislature does their duty, because we are also failing in the legislature, because some of these critical things are brought on board the last minute. So in a way, many of our members of parliament and even political party leaders may not even know what has changed in the legal system. And so these are the things that we need to work on. And if we can come to the table with clean hands, we want to address concerns of Kenyan people, we can actually be able to work on a roadmap. And I think that will be able to bring some sort of reason to the table. Okay.
As I hear you, the chatter from some quarters is that the Azimio side in all of this is not being genuine, because if they actually wanted to see some of the things that you're speaking about right now solved, that they would actually take another route and occupy fully the position of the opposition.
Absolutely.
And start within the legislative arm through Parliament, as well as starting to hold the executive accountable for some things, that they would take that on in that manner. Do you agree with that? The ingenuity of this, or the lack of genuineness here, is that an element to be looked into? Because if they really wanted to change, they would take up a position that would guarantee that somebody would pay attention to what they were saying.
Yeah, I've said it in other places, that our problem is actually lies in how the political class have been packaging their messaging. Because those of us who have been around here in this country when this conversation started, the issues of the cost of living were not there. The issues that were being raised were the major three issues. It was about the legitimacy, it's about the servers, it's about the Cherera 4. But when the leadership of the opposition tested the ground, they realized the ground is more angry than actually being able to listen to the stories about legitimacy, the Cherera 4 and other things. So because the sounds of Unga were actually louder there, they immediately packaged the information, their messaging now, to include Unga and other things. So they're actually the issues that have concerned with the Kenyan people, including the cost of living, are not the primary concern of the mass action. They are not. What is the primary mass issue of mobilization in the mass, mass action thing? Is all about the political agenda. It is not the social welfare of the Kenyan people. And I think Kenyans that we have just fallen into a trap. Because we are suffering from the challenges that we are facing. And always a human being have this weakness. It is very easy to blame somebody. And sometimes in the religious community, sometimes we say, people may even blame Satan where he's not supposed to be blamed. Because, you fail yourself, but because there is other things that you can actually blame, you can say, Shaitan. But some of the things are actually, it's you, it's not Satan, it's you. So here, it is also very easy to say, we have a problem because this is what had happened. But really, our issues, our concerns are not the primary objective of Maandamano. Yes. And I think Kenyans need to take note of that. And actually, just listen at the messaging. You will actually take note of that.
If that's the case, then there's the other arm of our society, and that's where religious leaders would come in, and champion those issues that affect Kenyans, the social welfare issues that you're saying. If the political class is busy keeping us diverted with whatever they're doing, and then just sprinkling a bit of unga into the conversation to make us occupied, then you have a place to play. Then you also have a role to play in mainstreaming the unga issue, in mainstreaming the education crisis issue, in mainstreaming all these other social welfare issues. Where is the voice of the religious community?
There is. The only problem with us now at the religious sector is firefighting. We are trying to put up the fire instead of now focusing on that agenda that you are actually properly put it. And I think that should be the focus. Now that nobody wants to listen to us, then we need now to midwife that agenda, ensure that Kenyans understand what is actually hailing the country. And I think that is what we should do. Because if the voices of reason are not emerging, we have a problem. And one thing I also want to have taken note in terms of in our organization as a country is that we no longer have parliament.
What do we have?
We have a house of trade, where people who are actually in parliament no longer represent that Kenyan people. They may be few members of parliament. I'm not actually condemning everyone. There may be some few, but the majority of our members of parliament are people who are just listening what is being said out there by those who call shots in the political party structures. And we don't have. We no longer have the parliament like what we used to have before, where someone goes to parliament and it becomes that voice of the Kenyan people, that voice of reason. But today we have a parliament that is largely representative of the leadership of a political party. So if they are being told left, they just go left, they go right, they don't question what goes on. And you are aware that, and I'm not saying I'm agreeing with the former minister Matiang'i when he said we risk getting, wash in parliament, and to me, I want to say not necessarily wash, but people of low understanding or of people who actually have very low appreciation of the issues affecting the country, or even people who understand what is their role as parliamentarians. Because I don't think if today you are in parliament and you belong to Kenya Kwanza coalition, and then there is a very good bill that has been brought by Azimio, you have to throw it away because it has been brought by Azimio.
Right.
I think that's not what Kenyans expect from their members of parliament. We expect members of parliament to be there for the common good of the Kenyan people, apart from their own constituencies that they represent, but they need also to be looking at the overall good of the country. If they are doing that, then, Madam, your point now comes in handy, that most of the things that we are seeing today, they could have been able to dialogue and sort it out at their level in parliament and give us the best of legislation that will guide this country. But because they are being, they are being micromanaged, it becomes very difficult for them to...
They're spineless.
Really, exactly, yes. Yeah.
Sheikh, why do you think political leaders don't listen to you religious leaders?
I don't want to say we represent different constituencies, but we have different standing in society. Because one, the political, the religious leadership, we speak to the people, including the political class. We tell them the truth and also focus on not only what is good in this world, but also in the next world. Okay,
in the world after.
In the world after. But what we are seeing in the political leaders, they are just, majority of them are just really for the interests of their political parties, largely.
Do you know why politicians listened to you, religious leaders, in the past? If you were asked, and I'm asking, do you know why they listened to you, why they would pay heed? I will tell you. It is because they know people listened to you.
Yes.
The currency that politicians trade with are people. Now, somewhere along the line, it appears political leaders lost the people. And people listen more to the politicians than they listen to you, religious leaders. So it's a fight that currently you have lost. So even as you speak, they know full well that you do not have the might or the strength to change anything for them. That's why they can ignore you. If they knew the people were with you, they would not ignore you.
No. Actually, they are not ignoring us. They are just playing smart.
It's playing smart.
They are not telling us that we don't listen to you and whatever. They are just saying, please, gentlemen, just stay kando. They are not saying that we don't want you.
Is that smart or is that ignoring? I mean, in all honesty,
what?
We Africans really respect leadership.
Yes.
And religious leadership we genuinely respect.
Mm-hmm.
And we listen to religious leaders more than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps maybe more, maybe our parents. But religious leaders are listened to. We are in a situation where I'm saying they're not being listened to.
Because of the dialogue issue.
Because we listen more to the politicians than we listen to you. Why?
Do they hear the politicians more than they hear the religious leaders? And when I say hear, is it because that is the noise that's being made? Is that a question to say that? How often is the voice of a religious leader heard in this country? Mm-hmm. So much so that when something like this happens and any of our religious leaders would come up and speak today, this is a voice that you've been hearing on a regular basis. So when they speak, you're likely to listen. Are we saying then that the religious leader's voice has been drowned out by that of the politician? And so even when there is an issue of conflict like there is today, and when we do hear the voice of the religious leader, because it's something that sounds foreign all of a sudden, that you're not likely to hear it.
Yeah, let me admit one thing, that that small kind of, I want to call it small because it's actually not big as such. One of the things that the religious leaders are currently facing is that some of us have taken sides. They have actually identified themselves with certain positions, and by that you actually deny yourself the respect from the other group, because you are expected to be someone who is actually reasoning in the middle, not in standing in one other side. So we are in a dilemma that when you are talking on this side of the coin, then the other person is on the other side responding to you, not necessarily the political leaders. And the political leaders are very smart. For them to undermine that legitimacy of the religious leadership, they equally mobilize other religious leaders so that they can actually be able to counter the other. So what happens? Finally, you may find religious leaders being divided and throwing stones from different sides, and that is now the place where we are actually putting our authority into question, because when you have that, then you'll actually be able to you are shy, because how do you respond to this side? For example, in every Sunday in this country, the president is in a church, and when he's speaking with the religious leaders behind him. The prime minister will also find another church. He will also go to the church with his troops and do exactly the same. What happens with whatever. So, and you can imagine, if you look at check on the pattern on the churches the leaders visit
Yeah.
If you look at the pattern, you'll get something. Well, I don't want to say that now.
Don't worry, we'll do that for you.
Yeah.
You don't want to say the obvious.
Yeah. You'll check the pattern and realize, okay, this is that. And that is where we have a problem. So when the few of us at the center now come and say, gentlemen, can we call this house to order? Now, it becomes very difficult because you have your colleagues on the other side and you have your colleagues on the other side. So now, who are you? Can you now stand aside, Kidogo, and your sister, we chat our way out? That is the challenge. Yeah.
How do we get back to that moment when religious leaders even had an ufungamano? You know, where we had yes, there's a opposition, politicians, there's a civil society, and there's religious leaders. It was distinct. It wasn't religious leaders in civil society
not swallowed
or
into that
religious
whole thing.
leaders in opposition politics. It was religious leaders, there's civil society on one side, there's political parties on the other side. How do we get back to that?
We are there. We are actually on the road towards that direction, because we have also noted what I've just shared with you, the challenges that are actually emerging, and who stands for Kenya. We have, when the President Kibaki came into leadership, he tapped seriously into the civil society, and he almost crippled the civil society because he took the best brains from the civil society. And you know, our civil society relies largely in the donor funding.
Yeah.
So when we have those brains shifting to government and now taking the expertise they have and the networks they have, what happened with that Kibaki administration? Most of the donor funding actually went to government, making drying up the sources to the civil society. So somehow civil society was crippled. Now we only remained with the church, not the church, actually religious sector, because religious sector have their own funding mechanisms locally, so they are always there. They are there to wherever. But so what we need to do now, after the much celebrated Fungamano initiative that led to the many successes in this country, we somehow relaxed, because to us, after the promulgation of the 2010 constitution, we thought everything else are actually now
we institutions were in place.
Exactly, because we have gotten so many institutions and kind of stuff. But now we are realizing, irrespective, despite that we have these institutions in place, but we are just like we have none in the country, because the systems that get these people into the leadership of these institutions are the same system. So you have a scenario where you have institutions, but they are not really functioning. And in fact, before elections, there was this survey that was done by the University of Nairobi, checking on the credibility, who does Kenyans trust? Yeah. And actually, number one was the religious leadership that Kenyans trust, and then the media. So I'm sure there was also another survey immediately after elections. We came down a little bit. We lost some 10 points. We dropped some I think about 10 of them. Then when people were trying to ask, why have we dropped? Then what I've just shared with you came out. That, we have realized. Yeah, exactly. We have taken sides and kind of stuff. So that trust have come down. So we are still up there.
Sheikh, thank you very much for joining us. Our challenge to you as chairman of SUPKEM, go and talk to the chairman of the Kenya Catholic Bishops, talk to the General Secretary of NCCK, talk to the leadership of the Hindu and all the others. You owe this country a duty.
Absolutely. They are hearing.
And we need to get you back to that level.
Thank you.